They told me the capital was a place of refinement, where wolves wore silk suits and sipped espresso instead of hunting by moonlight. They told me I'd be eaten alive if I stepped foot in the grand hall without an invitation, a pedigree, or a submissive tilt of my neck. But I'm Cleo. I don't tilt my neck for anyone, and I certainly don't wait for invitations when my pack's migration routes are being paved over for luxury condos. I walked into the Alpha King's court expecting a bureaucratic war, armed with nothing but a map and my own audacity. I expected security to drag me out. I expected the sneers of the elite. I didn't expect the heir to vanish from the room the moment he looked at me. I didn't expect the monster in the Italian suit to descend from his throne, not to kill me, but to inhale me. Welcome back to Eliana's Romance Library, your home for love and legends. Before we dive into the heat, I love seeing how far our stories travel. So head down to the comments right now and let me know. Where in the world are you listening from today? Drop your city or your flag. Now get comfortable. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Nomad at the Gate. I am not asking for a favor. I am telling you that your survey maps are wrong, I said, slamming my hand down on the polished mahogany table. The sound echoed through the cavernous silence of the throne room, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings and the horrified faces of the High Council. The Grand Steward, a man who looked like he'd been starched into existence, blinked at me. His nostrils flared, likely offended by the scent of pine needles, road dust, and cheap motel soap that clung to my leather jacket. I stood out like a sore thumb in a room full of tailored suits and evening gowns. But I didn't care. Being a nomad meant you stopped caring about appearances somewhere around the third state line you crossed. "Miss Cleo, is it?" the steward asked, saying my name like it was a contagious disease. You cannot simply barge into the royal session and demand an audience with the Alpha King. There are protocols, there are forms. Forms don't stop bulldozers, I shot back, crossing my arms over my chest. And I didn't barge. I walked through the front door. Maybe you should teach your guards to be less distracted by their phones. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd of courtiers lining the walls. I glanced around. They were beautiful, I'd give them that. High cheekbones, glossy hair, eyes that held the subtle glow of the wolf within. But they were soft, domesticated. They looked at me with a mix of disdain and curiosity, like I was a stray dog that had wandered into a cathedral. "The king is busy," the steward hissed, leaning in, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Leave now, before I have you removed. You are embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing you," I corrected him with a sharp grin. "There's a difference." I turned my gaze past the steward, aiming straight for the dais at the far end of the room. I wanted to see the man responsible for the red tape choking my life. I wanted to see Torin, the Alpha King, the ruler of all shifters, the man whose signature was on the eviction notice for my temporary camp. The throne was massive, carved from obsidian and gold, looming over the room like a dark mountain. And sitting on it was a man who made the mountain look small. He was leaning back, one hand propping up his chin, looking bored out of his mind. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my entire life's earnings, black on black, fitting broad shoulders that screamed raw power even in repose. His hair was dark, swept back carelessly, and his eyes... I froze. He wasn't looking at the steward. He wasn't looking at the council. He was looking right at me. And he wasn't bored anymore. The moment our eyes met, a physical slam hit my chest, hard enough to knock the breath out of my lungs. It wasn't fear. It was something hotter, heavier. A scent crashed into me, obliterating the smell of expensive perfume and floor wax. Vanilla. Dark, rich vanilla. And rain. The heavy electric smell of the air right before a storm breaks. My wolf, usually a dormant, lazy creature during the day, suddenly woke up and clawed at the inside of my ribcage, howling a single terrifying word. Mine. No. Absolutely not. That was impossible. I was a nomad. He was the king. The iron law was clear. Royalty didn't mix with strays. We were different species, practically. I took a step back, my boots squeaking on the marble floor. "Steward," a voice rumbled. It wasn't a shout, but it silenced the room instantly. It was a voice that vibrated in the floorboards, deep and textured like gravel rolling over velvet. Torin stood up. The movement was fluid, predatory. The council members flinched. The steward went pale. "Your Majesty," the steward stammered, turning around. "I apologize for this interruption. This person was just leaving. Security." "Dismiss them," Torin said. He didn't look at the steward. His golden gaze was pinned to me, intense and unblinking. "Dismiss the security?" the steward asked, confused. "Dismiss the court," Torin corrected, his voice dropping an octave. "Everyone out, now." The room exploded into hushed whispers. To dismiss a royal session was unheard of. It was illegal, probably. But nobody argued with a man who radiated that much dominance. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with his pheromones. It was suffocating and intoxicating all at once. "But sire," an elder started to protest. Torin didn't even turn his head. A low, warning growl ripped from his throat, a sound so primal it made the hair on my arms stand up. The elder snapped his mouth shut and hurried toward the exit. In seconds, the stream of silk and suits was flooding out the double doors, leaving me alone in the vast, echoing hall. Alone with him. "Run!" my brain screamed. "Stay," my soul whispered. Torin descended the stairs of the dais. He didn't walk like a king. He stalked like a hunter who had finally cornered the prize he'd been tracking for a lifetime. 1 step. 2 steps. The distance between us closed, and with every inch the scent of vanilla and rain grew stronger, making my head spin. I should have bowed. I should have apologized. I should have run for the hills. Instead, I lifted my chin. I dug my nails into my palms to stop my hands from shaking. I was Cleo. I didn't cower. "You have a border dispute," he said, stopping directly in front of me. He was tall, agonizingly tall. I had to crane my neck to look him in the eye. Up close, his eyes were a swirling vortex of gold and amber, burning with a hunger that made my knees weak. "I do," I managed to say, though my voice sounded breathless, traitorous. "Your zoning committee is incompetent." "I don't care about the zones," he murmured. He raised a hand, his fingers hovering near my face. I flinched, expecting a strike, or a gesture for guards to grab me. But his hand simply drifted closer, the warmth radiating from his skin, feeling like a hearth fire in winter. He didn't touch me, not yet. He just traced the air near my jawline, as if testing a force field. "You smell," he whispered, "like trouble." "I am trouble," I warned him, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "And you're violating personal space protocols, Your Majesty." A corner of his mouth ticked up, a dark, dangerous smirk. "There are no protocols for this, little nomad." He leaned in, his nose brushing the sensitive skin just below my ear, and inhaled deeply. The sound of his breath hitching sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core, frying every logical circuit I had left. "You shouldn't be here," he groaned against my skin, his voice rough with need. "But now that you are, I'm never letting you leave." Chapter 2. The law is broken. "Never letting me leave?" I repeated, the words feeling thick and foreign on my tongue. "That sounds remarkably like kidnapping, Your Majesty." I tried to pull back, to put some sensible distance between my leather jacket and his bespoke Italian wool, but my body refused to cooperate. My feet felt like they were nailed to the marble floor. The scent of him, that maddening, intoxicating mix of storm clouds and rich vanilla, was weaving a net around my brain, short-circuiting my survival instincts. Torin didn't step back. In fact, he stepped closer, invading my personal space with the arrogance of a man who owned the very air we were breathing. "Kidnapping implies you want to be somewhere else," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that rattled my ribcage. "Do you want to be somewhere else, Cleo?" I opened my mouth to say yes, to tell him I had a beat-up truck parked in the loading zone that was probably getting a ticket, and a pack of nomads waiting for me 3 towns over. But the words stuck in my throat. My wolf was practically purring, curling up in the metaphorical sunbeam of his presence. It was traitorous. "Sire!" The sharp, panic-stricken voice of the steward shattered the moment. We both turned, Torin with a slow, lethal grace and me with a jolt of adrenaline. The stiff man in the suit hadn't left. He was hovering by the double doors, clutching a tablet to his chest like a shield. "Sire, please," the steward stammered, his eyes darting between the king and me with undisguised horror. "You cannot be seen fraternizing. The Iron Law, Article 4. The Alpha King is forbidden from engaging with unpack wolves. If the council gets wind that you are—" "The council," Torin interrupted, his voice frighteningly calm, "can choke on Article 4. He reached out and, without breaking eye contact with the steward, took my hand. The moment his skin touched mine, the world tilted. It wasn't just a spark, it was a lightning strike. A jolt of pure, raw energy surged up my arm, scorching my nerves and making my breath hitch audibly. It felt like sticking a fork into a power outlet, but instead of pain, it was pure, unadulterated pleasure. Torin's fingers tightened around mine, possessive and firm. I looked down at our joined hands, his large, scarred, manicured, mine calloused, dusty, with chipped black nail polish. It looked wrong. It felt more right than anything I had ever known. "Come," Torin commanded, tugging me gently but inexorably toward a side door concealed behind a heavy velvet tapestry. "Wait," I protested, digging the heels of my boots into the floor. "I'm serious, I have a truck outside. It has a very temperamental transmission, and if I don't warm it up—" "I'll buy you a dealership," he said, not breaking stride. "I don't want a dealership. I want my freedom!" I snapped, though the protest lacked heat. The warmth of his hand was seeping into my bloodstream, acting like a sedative. "You have your freedom," he said, glancing back at me, his golden eyes glowing with that terrifying inner light. "You are free to go anywhere you like, Cleo, as long as it is with me." He pushed the hidden door open, revealing a private corridor lined with plush carpet and softly glowing sconces. This wasn't the public face of the palace. This was the inner sanctum. "You're insane," I muttered, stumbling slightly as I tried to keep up with his long strides. "You're the Alpha King. You're supposed to be the pillar of logic and tradition. You're breaking your own laws right now." Torin stopped abruptly. I nearly crashed into his back. He turned, pinning me with a look so intense it felt like a physical weight. "The law was written by men who had never found their true mate," he said, his voice rough. "They wrote rules for politics. They didn't write rules for this." He lifted our joined hands, bringing my dusty knuckles to his lips. He kissed them, slow and reverent, his eyes never leaving mine. The sensation of his warm mouth on my skin sent a shiver racing down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Now," he whispered against my skin. "Are you coming, or do I have to carry you?" I looked at him. I looked at the corridor. I thought about my truck. I thought about the road. And then I realized that for the first time in my life, the road didn't look like freedom anymore. It looked lonely. "I can walk," I grumbled, trying to salvage a shred of my dignity. "But if you think I'm swooning, you're wrong." Torin smirked, a devastating expression that probably toppled governments. "We'll see." Chapter 3. The Golden Cage. The elevator was made of glass and gold, because of course it was. It shot upward with a stomach-churning smoothness, rising high above the city skyline. I stood with my back pressed against the glass wall, watching the buildings shrink below us, trying to ignore the fact that I was locked in a flying box with a predator. Torin stood in the center of the car, unbuttoning his suit jacket. He tossed it over the railing like it was a rag, loosening his tie with a jerk of his wrist. The casual dismantling of his perfect image was doing things to my pulse that I didn't appreciate. "So," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the confined space. "Where are we going? The dungeon? A secret torture chamber? A tea party? Torin glanced at me, the gold in his eyes settling into a molten simmer. My home. Your home is the palace. We were just in the palace. That was the office, he corrected. This is where I live. The elevator chimed, a polite, melodic sound that contrasted sharply with the chaotic drumming of my heart. The doors slid open, revealing a space that was less a home and more a architectural flex. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the territory. The floors were dark hardwood, scattered with rugs that looked like they cost more than my Nomad clan's entire convoy. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, unlit but imposing. It was cold, beautiful, and vast, and empty. Do you live here alone? I asked, stepping out cautiously. I kept my boots quiet, a habit from years of sneaking through territories where I wasn't welcome. I did, Torin said. He followed me out, and as he crossed the threshold, he tapped a panel on the wall. Click, thud. The sound of heavy bolts sliding into place echoed through the room. I spun around. The elevator doors had closed. The panel on the wall glowed red. Did you just lock us in? I asked, my hands balling into fists. The fierce instinct to fight, the one that had kept me alive in biker bars and border skirmishes, flared hot and bright. Because if you think I'm going to be some tower princess you keep in a jar, you've got the wrong wolf. I bite, Torin, and I haven't had my shots. Torin chuckled darkly, walking past me toward a wet bar in the corner. He poured a glass of amber liquid, his movements relaxed, fluid. I'm counting on you biting, Cleo, but not yet. He took a sip, then turned to face me, leaning his hip against the counter. And I locked the door to keep the world out, not to keep you in. My security team is currently having a collective aneurysm downstairs. If I leave that door unlocked, 5 advisors, 3 generals, and a very annoying PR specialist will be up here in 2 minutes to tell me why I can't mate with a nomad. Mate, I repeated, the word hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. You keep saying that word. We just met. You don't know me. I don't know you. You don't even know my favorite color. Green, he said instantly. Like the moss on the north side of the trees where you prefer to sleep. You prefer sleeping outdoors, but you hate the rain because it dampens your scent trail. You like your meat rare. You drive a Ford that needs a new alternator, and you're currently terrified because you've never felt a pull this strong in your life. I stared at him, my mouth slightly open. How? I can smell it on you, he said, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. He set the glass down and started walking toward me again. I can smell the moss on your jacket, the grease on your hands, and the fear in your sweat. He stopped inches from me. The vanilla scent was overwhelming now, wrapping around me, drugging me. I'm not scared of you, I lied, lifting my chin defiantly. I know, he agreed. He reached out, his hand cupping my jaw, his thumb brushing over my bottom lip. The contact made my knees buckle, and I had to grab his forearms to stay upright. His muscles were hard as rock beneath the fine cotton of his shirt. You're not scared of me, he whispered, leaning down until his forehead rested against mine. You're scared of how much you want this. You're scared because for the first time in your life, you don't have to fight to survive. You just have to surrender. I don't surrender, I breathed, though the protest was weak, melting in the heat radiating from him. You will, Torin promised, his lips hovering dangerously close to mine. And when you do, Cleo, I'm going to give you the world. Chapter 4. Inhaling the storm. I don't want the world, I managed to whisper, though the protest sounded about as convincing as a wet paper towel. I just want my truck, and maybe a burger. Torin didn't laugh this time. He moved his hand from my jaw to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in the messy, wind-knotted hair at the nape. The sensation was electric, a live wire grounding itself against my spine. He guided me backward, not forcefully, but with a magnetic pull I couldn't resist until my shoulder blades hit the cool, thick glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. Behind me, the city sprawled out like a circuit board of gold and white lights, millions of people living their normal, non-magical lives. But in here, suspended 100 stories in the air, the atmosphere was pressurized. "You are a liar, Cleo," Torin murmured, stepping into the space between my legs. He didn't touch me with his body yet, leaving a maddening inch of air between us. "You've spent your whole life running, driving from state to state, sleeping in truck stops, eating diner food. You tell yourself it's freedom, but I can smell the loneliness on you. It's bitter, like old coffee." "It's not loneliness," I argued, my voice trembling as I tried to hold his gaze. "It's independence. There's a difference. I answer to no one. I pack up and leave whenever I want." "And that's what terrifies you," he countered softly. "That for the first time, you've found a place you can't leave. Not because of a lock, but because of biology." He leaned in, his nose brushing the sensitive skin of my throat. I gasped, my head falling back against the glass involuntarily. The view behind me spun, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. "Let me show you," he growled. He didn't kiss me. He did something far more intimate. He scented me. He buried his face in the curve of my neck, inhaling deeply, sharply. It wasn't a polite sniff. It was a primal intake of breath, the sound of a predator memorizing the chemical signature of his mate. The vibration of his inhale traveled through my skin, resonating in my bones. "Vanilla," he muttered against my pulse point, his lips grazing the skin. Wild vanilla. Not the sweet artificial kind, the kind that grows in the dark, under the canopy, and rain, cold rain on hot asphalt. My knees gave out. They didn't just weaken, they liquidated. If Torin hadn't slammed his hands against the glass on either side of my head, caging me in, I would have slid right down to the floor. "Stop," I breathed, gripping the lapels of his expensive shirt to keep myself upright. "You're doing the alpha voice thing, it's cheating." "I'm not using my voice," he whispered, moving his nose up to my jawline, effectively tracing the path of my jugular vein. "This is just chemistry, little Nomad. It's your soul recognizing its other half. It's the bond demanding to be fed." I squeezed my eyes shut. The bond. The fairy tale they told us as pups. One day, you'll meet someone who smells like home, and you'll never want to run again. I always thought it was propaganda to keep young wolves from going rogue. But God, he smelled good. He smelled like safety. He smelled like a thunderstorm that would destroy everything in its path just to keep me dry. "I'm dirty," I blurted out, grasping for any excuse to break the spell. "I've been driving for 3 days. I haven't showered since Arizona. I probably smell like diesel and corn chips." Torin pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the gold irises. He looked deranged, beautifully, obsessively deranged. "You smell," he corrected, his voice rough with restraint, "like the only thing I ever want to consume." He pressed his forehead against mine, his breathing heavy. "But if you want a shower, Cleo, I will give you a shower. I will give you the water from the clouds if you ask for it." He pulled away from the window, scooping me up into his arms effortlessly. I didn't even have time to protest before my feet left the ground. "I can walk," I squeaked, kicking my legs. "I know," he said, carrying me toward a set of double doors on the far wall. "But I've waited 300 years to hold you. I'm not wasting a second of walking time." Chapter 5. The Royal Bath. The bathroom was offensive. That was the only word for it. It was larger than the entire cabin I'd rented last winter in Montana. The floor was heated black marble. The walls were lined with mirrors that didn't fog. And in the center of the room sat a bathtub that wasn't a tub. It was a small lake carved out of a single piece of dark granite. "This is ridiculous," I muttered as Torin set me down on the vanity counter. "Do you host swim meets in here?" "It fits too," Torin said simply, walking over to the taps. He turned them on, and steam instantly began to rise, smelling of eucalyptus and mint. And since I am substantially larger than the average wolf, I require space. He turned back to me, his gaze sweeping over my worn leather jacket, my dusty jeans, and my scuffed boots. He stepped between my knees, his hands resting on my thighs. The heat of his palms seeped through the denim, making my skin prickle. "Let me take care of you," he said. It wasn't a command. It was a request. A plea. "I can wash myself," I said, crossing my arms defensively. "I've been doing it for 24 years. I'm quite good at it." "I have no doubt," Torin murmured, reaching for the zipper of my jacket. "But today you don't have to." He pulled the zipper down slowly. The sound was loud in the quiet, steamy room. He peeled the heavy leather off my shoulders, letting it drop to the floor. Then he reached for my boots. I should have kicked him. I should have pushed him away and demanded a guest room with a locking door, but the fight was draining out of me, replaced by a heavy, languid exhaustion. I was tired. I was so tired of driving, of fighting, of always looking over my shoulder. "Okay," I whispered, "but if you try anything funny, I'll drown you." Torin smirked, kneeling to unlace my boots. Duly noted. He stripped me down with a clinical, reverent efficiency. There was no leering, no groping. He treated my body like it was a sacred artifact he was terrified of breaking. When I was finally standing there, shivering slightly in the cool air, he didn't stare at my nakedness. He met my eyes. "In," he instructed, nodding toward the steaming water. I climbed into the massive tub. The water was hot, bordering on scalding, just the way I liked it. I sank down until the water lapped at my chin, letting out a long groan as the heat penetrated my aching muscles. Torin rolled up the sleeves of his dress shirt, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle and dusted with dark hair. He grabbed a bottle of something that looked like liquid gold and poured it onto a sponge. "Turn around," he said. I hesitated, then turned my back to him. He began to wash me. It wasn't sexual. It was spiritual. The sponge moved in slow, rhythmic circles over my shoulders, my back, my arms. He scrubbed away the road dust, the grease, the scent of the cheap motels. "You have scars," he murmured, his fingers tracing a jagged white line on my shoulder blade, a souvenir from a territorial dispute in Nevada. "Occupational hazard," I mumbled, resting my chin on my knees. "Nomads aren't exactly welcome in most places." "They will be welcome here," Torin vowed, his voice dark. "Anyone who touched you to give you this mark? Are they alive?" "Barely," I said with a grim satisfaction. "Good." He moved to my hair next. He poured warm water over my head, then massaged shampoo into my scalp. His fingers were strong, confident. The sensation was so intense I had to bite my lip to keep from moaning. It was intimate in a way that sex wasn't. Anyone could have sex. But letting the alpha king of the continent wash your hair while you sat naked in his tub? That was a level of vulnerability that terrified me. "Torin," I whispered, the name slipping out before I could stop it. "I'm here," he answered instantly, rinsing the suds away. "Why me?" I asked, turning my head slightly to look at him. "You could have anyone. Highborn wolves, supermodels. Why a stray?" Torin froze. He dropped the sponge into the water and cupped my wet face with both hands, forcing me to look at him. "You think you're a stray?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Cleo, look at you. You're fire. You're survival. You walked into my court and silenced a room full of apex predators just by existing. I don't want a highborn lapdog. I want a partner. I want someone who can run with me without getting winded." He leaned down and kissed my forehead, a soft, lingering pressure. "I didn't choose you," he whispered. "My soul recognized you. There is no choice in gravity. You just fall." Chapter 6. A Queen's Appetite. By the time I was dried off and dressed, I was starving. And I don't mean I could eat a snack starving. I mean I could eat a raw elk starving. Torin had provided me with a silk robe that was clearly his. It swallowed me whole, the sleeves hanging past my hands, the hem dragging on the floor. It smelled like him, which didn't help my current state of mental instability. Every time I inhaled, I got a hit of that vanilla rain drug. We were in the dining room now. A table long enough to land a plane on stretched out before us, set with candles and crystal. Torin pulled out a chair at the head of the table. "Sit." I looked at the chair, then I looked at the other chair, set at the opposite end of the table, roughly 3 miles away. "Absolutely not," I said. Torin raised an eyebrow. "Is the chair defective?" "The geography is defective," I stated. "I'm not shouting across the room to ask for the salt, and I'm not sitting there while you sit here like some distant overlord." I grabbed the heavy oak chair next to his, the one meant for a guest of honor, and dragged it. It made a horrible screeching sound against the hardwood floor. Screech! Torin watched me, his lips twitching with amusement. I slammed the chair down directly to his right, so close the armrests were touching. "I'm sitting here," I declared, flopping down into the seat. "If that violates protocol, you can sue me." "I prefer this arrangement," Torin said, sitting down next to me. He leaned in, his voice dropping. "It makes it easier to reach you." A servant, silent, invisible, and efficient, placed plates in front of us. Steak, rare, with a side of roasted root vegetables. The scent of the meat hit my nose, and my stomach let out a roar that rivaled a lion. "Eat," Torin commanded gently. I didn't need to be told twice. I attacked the steak. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Melt in your mouth tender, perfectly seasoned. Midway through the meal, I realized Torin wasn't eating. He was watching me. He was watching my mouth as I chewed. He was watching my throat as I swallowed. "You're staring," I said, pointing my fork at him. "I'm admiring," he corrected. He cut a piece of his own steak, a perfect bloody center, and held it up on his fork. He didn't put it in his mouth. He held it to mine. My brain short-circuited, feeding. It was a pack thing. Alphas fed their mates to show provision, to show care. It was incredibly intimate. I should have refused. I should have told him I had my own steak. Instead, my lips parted. I let him feed me. His eyes flared gold as I took the bite. "Good girl," he rumbled. The praise hit me lower than my stomach. A sudden wave of heat washed over me, but it wasn't from the food. It started in my chest and radiated outward, making my skin feel tight and sensitive. I dropped my fork. The clatter echoed in the room. "Cleo?" Torin asked, his voice instantly shifting from playful to alert. "It's hot in here," I mumbled, tugging at the collar of the silk robe. "Is the fireplace on? Why is it so hot?" I felt a bead of sweat roll down my temple. My heart rate spiked, hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. The scent of the steak suddenly became too much, too rich. The only scent I wanted was him. Torin stood up, his chair scraping back. He was beside me in a second, the back of his hand pressing against my forehead. His skin felt impossibly cool against my burning flesh. "You're burning up," he whispered. But he didn't sound worried about a flu. He sounded hungry. He leaned down, sniffing my neck. He stiffened. A low growl vibrated in his chest. "What?" I panted, feeling dizzy. The room was spinning. "Did I get food poisoning? Is it the steak?" "It's not the steak," Torin said, his voice strained like he was holding back a tidal wave. He gripped the arms of my chair, caging me in, his face inches from mine. "Your scent has changed. It's sweeter, heavier." He looked at me with eyes that were no longer human. They were pure, glowing gold. "The heat," he rasped. "It's startin'." Chapter 7. The Fever Spikes. "I am not in heat," I argued, though the words came out as a slur. "I have the flu, or maybe I'm allergic to expensive upholstery. It's a reaction to the pretentiousness of this room." Torin ignored my medical diagnosis. He scooped me out of the chair as if I weighed nothing more than a throw pillow, cradling me against his chest. My face pressed into the crook of his neck, and I made the mistake of inhaling. The scent was violent. It wasn't just vanilla and rain anymore. It was deep, musk-heavy, and smelling distinctively of alpha. It hit the primitive part of my brain like a sledgehammer, screaming at me to bare my neck, to wrap my legs around him, to let him claim everything I was. "Put me down," I gasped, squirming feebly. My skin felt like it was 2 sizes too tight for my body. I need ice. I need to go outside. I need to drive." "You aren't driving anywhere, Cleo," Torin rumbled. The vibration of his voice against my ear sent a fresh wave of shivers down my spine. "You're burning up. Your heart is beating at twice its normal rate. If I let you go, you'll collapse." He strode out of the dining room and down the hall toward the bedroom. The movement made the world tilt. Colors were too bright. Shadows were too dark. The only thing that felt real was the solid wall of muscle beneath my cheek. "I hate this," I groaned, clutching his shirt. "I hate biology. I'm a free agent. I don't do this." "None of us choose when the fever hits," Torin said softly, kicking the bedroom door open. The room was dark, cool, and smelled entirely of him. He carried me to the bed, a mattress so large it probably had its own zip code, and laid me down in the center. The moment he let go, I felt bereft, cold. "Don't go," I whimpered, hatefully needy. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. He moved to the bedside table, cracking a bottle of water. He lifted my head, bringing the rim to my lips. "Drink." I drank, the water cool against my parched throat, but it didn't touch the fire in my blood. I kicked the blankets off. Then I kicked them back on. I felt restless, my limbs twitching with excess energy that had nowhere to go. "It hurts," I whispered, curling into a ball. It was a deep, dull ache in my core, a void demanding to be filled. Torin sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't hover. He just stayed close, a solid anchor in the storm. He reached out and placed his hand on my ankle. His skin was shockingly cool. "Focus on me," he instructed, his voice low and commanding. "Don't fight it, Cleo. Fighting it makes the fever spike higher. Just ride the wave." "Easy for you to say," I snapped, rolling onto my back to glare at him. "You're not the one turning into a puddle of hormonal goo." "You aren't goo," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You are magnificent. Even feverish and snarling, you are the most terrifyingly beautiful thing I have ever seen." He leaned forward, bracing his hands on either side of my hips. The mattress dipped under his weight. "Tell me what you need." "I don't know," I lied. I knew exactly what I needed. I needed him to stop looking at me like I was holy and start touching me like I was his. But the words were stuck behind a wall of stubborn pride. "Then let me guess," he whispered. Chapter 8. Skin and Scars. "The robe," Torin murmured, his eyes tracking the way the silk clung to my damp skin. "It's bothering you." It was. The silk, which had felt luxurious 10 minutes ago, now felt abrasive. Every thread rubbing against my hypersensitive nerves felt like sandpaper. I tugged at the lapels, frustrated. "Off!" I commanded, my voice raspy. Torin didn't hesitate. He moved with a predator's grace, his hands finding the belt. He undid the knot and the robe fell open. I wasn't wearing anything underneath. I braced myself for the leer, the hungry scan that every man I'd ever met would have given me. But Torin didn't leer. He looked at me with a solemn intensity, like he was reading a map. His gaze traced the curve of my hip, then moved up to my ribs. He stopped at the jagged silver line of scar tissue that ran from my sternum to my side. "Who?" he asked. The single word was heavy, loaded with a calm, terrifying violence. "A bear," I breathed, the memory hazy through the heat. 2 winters ago, I was scavenging too close to a den. Mama didn't like it. Torin's jaw tightened. He reached out, his fingertips grazing the scar. He didn't touch the skin, just the air above it, as if he was afraid his touch would burn me. "You were alone?" "I'm always alone," I said. "I stitched it myself." Pain flashed in his eyes. Not pity, but a deep, resonant sorrow that I had been without a pack to lick my wounds. "You have scars too," I whispered, reaching up. My hand shook, but I managed to touch his chest. Through the opening of his dress shirt, I could see the thick, raised ridges of old battles. I pushed the fabric aside, my palm flattening against his pec. His heart slammed against my hand. Thud, 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 thud. A heavy, powerful rhythm that matched the chaos in my own chest. "A challenge for the throne," he explained, covering my hand with his. 100 years ago. The challenger didn't make it. "And that one?" I pointed to a small circular burn mark near his collarbone. "A witch," he said dismissively. "She missed." We lay there for a moment, trading cartography of our pain. It was a strange foreplay, acknowledging the violence of our pasts before the intimacy of our future. "I want to feel you," I said suddenly. The need was sharp, urgent. "Not the shirt. You." Torin sat up, his eyes never leaving mine. He unbuttoned his shirt, his movements slow, deliberate. He shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor. God. He was sculptured marble and raw power. Broad shoulders, tapered waist, muscles that shifted and coiled with every breath. He leaned back down, hovering over me. "Touching implies consequences, Cleo," he warned, his voice straining. "I'll take the risk." I reached up and wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him down. The moment our skin met, chest to chest, stomach to stomach, a literal spark snapped between us. "Zst!" I gasped, arching my back. It wasn't pain. It was a jolt of pure awakening. It felt like my soul was being hot-wired. The fever in my blood didn't cool. It changed. It shifted from a sickly heat to a roaring fire. "Mine!" Torin growled, burying his face in my neck again. "You feel it. Tell me, you feel it." "I feel it," I sobbed, clutching his shoulders. "It's too much." "It's not enough," he countered, biting lightly at the sensitive cord of my neck. "It will never be enough." Chapter 9. The Fierce Challenge. Torin was everywhere. He was heavy, dominant, consuming. He was pressing me into the mattress, his weight a comforting blanket, but my inner wolf, the nomad who had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of freedom, suddenly snarled. Trapped. The instinct was irrational. He wasn't hurting me. He was worshipping me. But the position, me on my back, him looming over me, triggered a flash of defiance that cut through the haze of the heat. "Wait," I said, breathless. Torin stopped instantly. He froze, his muscles locking up. He pulled back to look at my face, concern warring with the golden glaze of lust in his eyes. "Too fast?" "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Too heavy. You're smothering me." "I'm an alpha," he said, as if that explained everything. "I cover." "And I'm a nomad," I shot back, my eyes narrowing. "I don't get covered. I move." I placed my hands flat against his chest. "Roll over." Torin blinked. The command took him by surprise. For a second, I thought the Alpha King would laugh or refuse. Nobody told the king to roll over. But then a slow, wicked grin spread across his face. "You want to drive, little nomad?" "I always drive," I said. "Now move." I shoved him. It shouldn't have worked. He outweighed me by 100 pounds of pure muscle, but he let me. He allowed the momentum to take him, rolling onto his back with a fluid grace, pulling me with him until I was straddling his hips. The shift in perspective was dizzying. Suddenly, I was looking down at him. I was the one looming. I pinned his wrists to the mattress above his head. Better, I decided, looking down at the magnificent expanse of him. Torin looked up at me, and the expression on his face stole the breath from my lungs. It wasn't submission. An alpha like him would never truly submit, But it was allowance. He was giving me this power because he trusted me with it. He lay vulnerable, his throat bared, his eyes burning with pride. "Fierce," he murmured, straining against my hold just enough to test my grip. "My fierce queen." "I'm not your queen yet," I reminded him, leaning down until my hair curtained around us, creating a private world. "Right now, I'm just the wolf who has you pinned." "So you do," he agreed, his voice rough. He bucked his hips upward, a subtle, taunting movement that made my breath hitch. "So what are you going to do with me, Cleo? I'm at your mercy." I ground down against him, reveling in the groan that ripped from his throat. The power dynamic had flipped, and the heat in the room skyrocketed. "I'm going to make you forget you ever had a crown," I whispered against his lips. "Try," he challenged, freeing one hand to grip the back of my neck, holding me in place. "But be warned, Cleo. If you start this, there is no calling a truce. We go until the bond is sealed." I looked into those golden, ancient eyes, and I knew he was right. There was no going back to the truck, no going back to the road. This was the cliff edge. "I don't want a truce," I said, leaning in to bite his lower lip. "I want to surrender." "Then take it," he growled. Chapter 10. The Edge of Control. "Take it," I whispered, but the bravado in my voice was already fracturing under the weight of the moment. I kissed him. It wasn't a polite testing the waters kiss. It was a collision. I crashed my mouth against his, driven by an instinct so old it felt like it predated my own birth. I expected him to take over, to dominate the kiss like he dominated a room. But he didn't. He lay there, his hands gripping my hips to keep me anchored, and he let me devour him. He tasted like scotch and power. His lips were firm, hot, and moving against mine with a devastatingly slow rhythm that drove me insane. I tangled my fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer, trying to eliminate the microscopic distance between our souls. The heat in the room was suffocating now. My skin felt like it was humming, vibrating at a frequency that shattered glass. Every place our bodies touched, thighs, chest, hips, felt like a brand. I pulled back, gasping for air, my chest heaving. Torin looked wrecked. His hair was messy from my hands, his lips swollen, his eyes blown so wide the gold had swallowed the white. "You realize," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together, "that if we do this, you can never leave. There is no divorce in our world, Cleo. There is no irreconcilable differences. Once I mark you, you are mine until the stars burn out." "Are you trying to talk me out of it?" I asked, breathless, tracing the sharp line of his jaw with my thumb. "Because you're doing a terrible job." "I'm giving you a final exit," he said, though his grip on my hips tightened, bruisingly possessive. "I am a selfish man, Cleo. I have taken everything I ever wanted. But I will not take your freedom unless you give it to me willingly. If you want to walk out that door, you have to do it now, right now, before the haze takes us both." I looked down at him, the Alpha King, the monster of the bedtime stories. He looked terrified, not of the council or the law or the fallout. He was terrified that I would choose the door. I thought about my truck, rusting in the parking lot. I thought about the endless miles of highway, the cold nights sleeping in the cab, the constant gnawing emptiness of being a lone wolf in a world of packs. I had called it freedom, but looking at Torin, seeing the raw, naked hope in his eyes, I realized it hadn't been freedom. It had been exile. "I don't want the door," I whispered, leaning down until our noses brushed. "I want the lock." Torin let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "The lock?" "Lock me in, Torin," I commanded, my voice fierce despite the tremors in my hands. "Throw away the key. I'm tired of running. I want to stay." "You stay," he vowed, his hands sliding up my back to pull me down. "You stay right here." He flipped us. The world spun, a blur of silk sheets and golden light. Suddenly I was on my back, sinking into the mattress, and Torin was hovering over me, a dark, beautiful storm cloud. The playfulness was gone. The allowance was over. He pressed his forehead against mine, his breathing ragged. "Count to 10, Cleo. Give me 10 seconds to hold on to my sanity before I lose it completely." "I don't want your sanity," I argued, wrapping my legs around his waist, pulling him flush against me. "I want the madness." 1, he counted, grinding his hips down, a slow, torturous friction that made me arch off the bed with a cry. "Torin, please." 2, he growled, kissing the sensitive spot behind my ear. 3. "Stop counting," I yelled, digging my nails into his shoulders. 4, he whispered against my throat, his teeth grazing the skin over my pulse. "I need to be sure. I need to be sure you won't regret this in the morning." "I'll regret it if you don't touch me right now." He pulled back, staring down at me with burning intensity. We were on the precipice. One more move, one more touch, and we would fall into the abyss of the mating cycle. 5, he breathed, and then the smell hit me. His scent spiked, turning darker, richer, more potent. It flooded my senses, drowning out the room, the city, the world. My vision tunneled. "Screw the count," I gasped. Chapter 11. Surrender. The heat didn't just rise, it detonated. 1 second, I was Cleo, the nomad who argued with kings. The next, I was a creature of pure instinct, dissolving into a puddle of need. The fever spiked so hard, my vision went white at the edges. It felt like fire was rushing through my veins, consuming every thought, every logic, every hesitation. "Torin!" I choked out. It wasn't a name anymore, it was a prayer. "I've got you," he growled. He didn't wait for 10. He couldn't. I felt his control snap like a dry twig. He descended on me, his mouth claiming mine with a hunger that should have been terrifying. It wasn't. It was the only thing keeping me tethered to the earth. His hands were everywhere, rough, desperate, possessive. He touched me as if he were trying to memorize my shape through his fingertips. The friction of skin on skin was electric, sending shockwaves of pleasure pain through my nervous system. "Please," I begged, arching into him, seeking friction, seeking pressure. "Please, I can't. It hurts." "I know, baby, I know," he soothed, though his voice was a ragged edge. "The first time is the hardest. The bond is trying to fuse before the mark is made. It's painful." "Fix it," I demanded, grabbing his face. "Make it stop." "I can't stop it," he said, his eyes glowing like molten gold. "I can only finish it." He moved, shifting his weight, settling between my thighs with a heavy, deliberate pressure. The sensation of him there, so close to the center of the ache, made me sob with relief. "Look at me," he commanded. I forced my eyes open. The room was swimming. The only thing in focus was him. The sharp angle of his cheekbones, the sweat beading on his brow, the absolute unyielding focus in his gaze. "You are mine," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Say it." My fiercely independent soul, the part of me that had sworn never to belong to anyone, didn't even flinch. It rejoiced. "I'm yours," I wept, the truth of it shattering me. "I'm yours, Torin. All of it." He didn't smile. He looked devastatingly serious. "And I am yours. No laws, no crowns, no borders. Just this." He moved then, closing the distance, bridging the gap between two separate bodies. The sensation was overwhelming, a feeling of fullness, of completion, that was so intense I stopped breathing. It wasn't just physical. It felt like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for 1,000 years. We moved together in a rhythm that was ancient and instinctive. There was no finesse, no technique. It was just heat, friction, sweat. The sound of our breathing, harsh and loud in the quiet room. I lost track of time. Minutes? Hours? It didn't matter. There was only the slide of his skin against mine, the taste of salt and vanilla on his neck, the way his muscles bunched under my hands. "Cleo," he groaned, his head falling back, the cords of his neck straining. I can't hold back the mark much longer. Don't, I panted, clutching his shoulders. Do it. Claim me. Are you sure? He asked, freezing, his body trembling with the effort of restraint. He needed permission. Even in the madness, the king needed his queen's consent. I bared my neck. It was the ultimate gesture of submission, the ultimate gesture of trust. I tilted my head back, exposing the sensitive skin where the mating gland pulsed, waiting. Do it, Torin, I whispered. Make me a queen. Chapter 12. The Mark of the King. The moment I spoke the words, the air in the room changed. The pressure dropped. The static electricity raised the hair on my arms. Torin looked at the bare expanse of my neck like a starving man looking at a feast. He lowered his head slowly, his breath hot and damp against my skin. This will hurt, he warned softly, but only for a second. I don't care, I said, and I didn't. I wanted the pain. I wanted the permanence of it. He kissed the spot first, a soft, lingering press of his lips right over the pulse. Then, his mouth opened. I felt the sharp prick of his canines, extending, sharpening. My heart stopped. Then he bit down. It wasn't a nip. He sank his teeth deep into the muscle, breaking the skin, piercing the gland. I screamed. It was a sharp, blinding flare of pain, like a hot iron branding me, but instantly, the pain was chased by a rush of endorphins so powerful it felt like I was floating. And then, the wall in my mind broke. Flood. It wasn't water. It was him. Torin's consciousness crashed into mine like a tidal wave. I didn't just feel his body anymore. I felt him. I felt his fierce possessiveness, a roaring golden fire that wanted to burn the world down to keep me safe. I felt his loneliness, a deep, cold well that he had been hiding for centuries. And I felt his love, a staggering, heavy weight of adoration that wrapped around my soul and squeezed. Cleo, his voice echoed, not in the room, in my head. Torin, I thought back, the mental pathway slick and new. He groaned, the sound vibrating through both our chests as he licked the mark, sealing the wound with his saliva. The healing factor of the alpha kicked in instantly. The burning pain faded to a dull, throbbing heat. He pulled back, his mouth stained with a drop of my blood. He looked wild, primal, but his eyes were clear. You're in my head, I whispered, staring at him. And you are in mine, he replied, his voice ragged. He collapsed onto his elbows, burying his face in my hair, his weight pinning me to the mattress. I can feel you. You're loud. I laughed, a weak, hysterical sound. I've been told that. We lay there as the aftershocks of the union rolled through us. The bond settled into a hum, a constant background noise of hear, hear, hear. I could feel his heartbeat without touching his chest. I could feel his contentment like a warm blanket. Torin shifted, rolling to his side and pulling me tightly against him. He ran his hand down my spine, marveling at the connection. It's done, he murmured. The law is broken. The bond is sealed. What happens now? I asked, tracing the new, tender scar on my neck. Do we get arrested? No, Torin said, his eyes closing, a sleepy, satisfied smile playing on his lips. Now, we sleep. And tomorrow? He trailed off, his breathing deepening as the exhaustion of the mating cycle took over. But I couldn't sleep. The bond was wide open, and through the link, I felt a sudden, sharp spike of something that wasn't contentment. It was coming from him, but it wasn't his emotion. It was knowledge. I sat up, my heart skipping a beat. Torin? I whispered. He didn't wake, but the feeling intensified. It was a sensation of power, not just physical strength, but something ancient, something that felt like the earth moving. I looked down at my hands. The tips of my fingers were glowing, not a reflection of the lights. They were actually glowing, a faint, iridescent silver light leaking from my pores. "Torin," I said louder, shaking his shoulder. "Torin, wake up." He grumbled, cracking one eye open. "What is it, my queen? Let me sleep." "I don't think I'm just a queen," I whispered, holding up my hand. The silver light flared, bright enough to cast a shadow on the wall. "I think the bond did something else." Torin sat up so fast he blurred. He stared at my hand, then at my face, his expression shifting from sleepy contentment to absolute shock. "That's not an alpha mark," he breathed, backing away slightly, his eyes wide. "Cleo. That's the moon mark. That's the mark of a true Luna." "A what?" "A legend," he said, looking at me with a mixture of awe and terrifying realization. "The legends say a true Luna doesn't just marry the king, she outranks him." Chapter 13. The Morning Glow. "I outrank you?" I repeated, staring at my hand. The silver light was pulsating now, syncing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. It cast a ghostly, ethereal glow over the crumpled sheets and Torin's stunned face. "Does that mean I get the bigger closet?" Torin didn't laugh. He looked like he was witnessing a religious event. He reached out, his large hand engulfing mine. The contrast was stark, his skin tanned and scarred, mine glowing like I'd swallowed a star. When his skin touched the light, it didn't burn. It hummed. A sound like a choir holding a single, perfect note vibrated through the room. "It means," he said, his voice quiet and unnervingly serious, "that the council can't say a damn word. The iron law forbids a king from mating with a nomad. But a true Luna? The laws don't apply to you, Cleo. You are the law. You're the physical manifestation of the moon's will." "Okay, no pressure," I muttered, trying to shake the light off my hand like water. "Turn it off, Torin. I look like a glow stick. How am I supposed to sneak around if I'm a walking nightlight?" "You don't sneak anymore," he reminded me, bringing my glowing knuckles to his lips. "And it will fade. It's the overflow of the bond settling. Your soul is just loud." He was right. As my heart rate slowed and the shock wore off, the silver light dimmed, fading back into my skin until I looked normal again. Well, mostly normal. I felt different, heavier, yet lighter, anchored. "Sleep," Torin commanded gently, pulling the duvet up over my shoulders. "The bond takes a toll. We need to recharge." I didn't think I could sleep. My brain was firing on all cylinders, replaying the last few hours, the bite, the claim, the glowing. But the moment Torin wrapped his arm around my waist and pulled me flush against his chest, a wave of unnatural, heavy sedation washed over me. It was his exhaustion, bleeding through the link. "Sleep, little nomad," his voice echoed in my head. "Get out of my head, Your Majesty," I thought back, but I was already drifting off. Never. When I woke up, the room was filled with the soft golden light of late morning. For a second, I panicked. I didn't know where I was. The sheets were too soft. The air smelled too expensive. Then I felt the weight on my legs. Torin was draped over me like a very expensive, very heavy blanket. His face was buried in the pillow next to mine, one arm thrown possessively over my stomach, his leg pinning mine down. I tried to wiggle free. He growled, a low rumble that vibrated through the mattress, and tightened his grip without waking up. 5 more minutes his voice grumbled in my mind. It was groggy and thick with sleep. "I have to pee," I projected back as loud as I could. Torin's eyes snapped open. He looked at me, blinked, and then a slow, lazy grin spread across his face. "Morning." "Morning," I said, feeling a sudden shy heat rise in my cheeks. We were naked. We were tangled, and I had a bite mark on my neck that was currently throbbing with a dull, pleasant ache. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the bathroom, catching a glimpse of myself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. I stopped dead. I looked wrecked. My hair was a bird's nest. My lips were swollen. But my neck. There, right over the junction of my shoulder and neck, was the mark. It wasn't an ugly scar. It was a perfect, raised circle of silver-white tissue, intricate like a Celtic knot. It looked like jewelry woven into my skin. Torin appeared behind me in the reflection. He wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder, looking at the mark with a terrifying amount of pride. "It healed well," he murmured, his eyes glowing faintly. "It's huge," I whispered, tracing it with my fingertip. "Everyone is going to see it." "Good," Torin said, kissing the spot right next to it. "Let them look. Let them know that the Nomad belongs to the king. And the king," he added, meeting my eyes in the mirror, "belongs to the Nomad." "I'm starving," I said, suddenly realizing my stomach was trying to digest itself. "Like, I could eat the furniture?" Torin laughed, the sound warm and carefree. "That's the bond. It burns calories. Come on, my fierce queen. Let's get you fed before you start chewing on the drywall." Chapter 14. The Open Door. The problem with being kidnapped by a king for a romantic interlude is that you don't exactly pack a bag. "I am not wearing that," I said, pointing an accusing finger at the garment Torin was holding up. It was a dress. A silk emerald green slip dress that looked like it would disintegrate if I looked at it too hard. It was beautiful, sure, but it wasn't me. "It brings out your eyes," Torin argued, holding it against his chest. He was already dressed in fresh, dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, looking unfairly put together. "It brings out my inability to run if I need to," I countered. I looked around the massive walk-in closet he had dragged me into. "Where are my clothes? My jeans? My jacket that smells like diesel?" "The cleaners have them," Torin said dismissively. "They are being fumigated." "Hey, that dirt is historical. It's from 3 different states." We compromised. I wore the silk dress, mostly because it felt like heaven against my sensitive skin, but I refused the heels he offered. I pulled on my battered combat boots. I looked in the mirror. Silk and leather. Elegance and grit. "Perfect," Torin said softly, standing behind me. He reached into a velvet box on the island counter and pulled out a necklace. It was a heavy gold chain with a pendant, a wolf carved from obsidian. He fastened it around my neck. It sat right below the mark, drawing the eye straight to the claim. "Are you ready?" he asked. His mental voice filtered in, laced with a mix of protectiveness and steel. "You don't have to be afraid. I can feel your anxiety." "I'm not anxious," I lied mentally. "I'm just anticipating the headache of dealing with your steward. If he speaks to you with anything less than absolute reverence, I will fire him. Don't fire the help, Torin. It's bad for morale." He offered me his arm. "Shall we?" I took it. His forearm was solid rock beneath the fabric. We walked out of the closet, through the bedroom with its tumbled sheets, through the living room and to the double doors of the penthouse. The heavy locks disengaged with a series of mechanical thuds. Torin pushed the doors open. I expected an empty hallway. What I got was a reception committee. The hallway was lined with palace guards, 6 of them, standing at rigid attention. And right in the center was the steward, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He was clutching a tablet, pacing back and forth. When the doors opened, the steward spun around. "Sire, finally, the council has been in emergency session for 24 hours. The press is—" He stopped. His eyes went from Torin's face, down to his arm, and landed on me. He didn't look at my boots. He didn't look at my messy hair. He looked straight at the silver scar on my neck. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he was going to faint. "Sweet moon," he whispered. The tablet slipped from his fingers and hit the carpet with a dull thud. The guards, who were trained to be stone statues, broke protocol. They turned their heads. They saw the mark. And then, in a ripple effect that made my stomach swoop, they dropped to one knee. Clank, clank, clank. Heads bowed, fists over hearts. "Luna," one of the guards murmured. I squeezed Torin's arm. "They're kneeling," I panicked mentally. Make them stop. I'm just Cleo. You are not just Cleo, Torin replied, his mental voice swelling with pride. You are the one who tamed the king. Rise, Torin commanded aloud. The guards stood up instantly, snapping back to attention, but their eyes were different now. There was no judgment, only awe. Steward, Torin said coolly, is the council in the throne room? Yes, sire, the steward squeaked, scrambling to pick up his tablet. They are drafting a letter of censure regarding your violation of the Iron Law. Torin laughed. It was a dark, dangerous sound. Excellent. I love a captive audience. He pulled me closer, his hand resting possessively on my waist. Walk with me, Cleo. Let's go rewrite the history books. The walk to the throne room felt like the longest mile of my life. Every servant we passed stopped, stared at the mark, and bowed. By the time we reached the massive double doors of the grand hall, the same doors I had barged through yesterday as a nobody, my heart was hammering a hole in my chest. Inside that room were the most powerful wolves in the hemisphere. The old guard, the ones who wrote the laws that said I was dirt. I'm with you, Torin promised, squeezing my hand. I am your shield. I don't need a shield, I thought back, lifting my chin and channeling every ounce of nomad grit I had. I have boots, Torin smirked. He looked at the guards manning the doors. Open them. The heavy oak doors groaned on their hinges, swinging inward to reveal the cavernous hall. It was packed. Not just the council. It seemed like half the city was in there. Hundreds of faces turned toward the light. The murmur of conversation died instantly. Torin stepped across the threshold, pulling me with him. We stood at the top of the stairs, framed by the doorway. The silence was absolute. And then, a single voice from the front row, an elder with white hair and a face like a prune, shouted out, "This is an abomination! You have brought a mongrel into the House of Kings." Torin didn't growl. He didn't shout. He just smiled, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Careful, elder," Torin said, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You are speaking to your queen." Chapter 15. Long live the queen. Queen? The elder sputtered, his face turning a shade of purple that clashed horribly with his velvet robes. He waved a leather-bound book in the air like a weapon. This is preposterous. The Iron Law is clear. Article 4, Section 1. The purity of the bloodline must be maintained. You cannot simply crown a stray. The word hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Torin's hand tightened on my waist, his fingers digging into the silk of my dress. A low, vibrating growl started deep in his chest, a sound like tectonic plates shifting before an earthquake. The air pressure in the room dropped. The lights flickered. Let me tear his throat out, Torin suggested pleasantly in my mind. It will only take a second. No, I projected back, placing my hand over his on my waist. If you tear his throat out, I have to clean the carpet. And I like this carpet. I stepped away from Torin. It was a small movement, but it sent a ripple of shock through the room. Aluna didn't step away from her alpha in a confrontation. She cowered behind him. But I wasn't a courtier, and I wasn't cowering. I walked down the first 3 steps of the dais. My combat boots made a heavy, rhythmic thud-thud on the marble, echoing louder than any stiletto ever could. "Elder," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Years of shouting over truck engines and windstorms had taught me how to project. You talk a lot about purity, but all I smell in this room is fear. I reached the bottom of the stairs and walked straight toward him. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, shrinking away from the combat boots and the glowing silver scar on my neck. You call me a stray, I continued, stopping 3 feet from the old wolf. I towered over him in attitude, if not height. You say I have no pedigree? You're right. I don't have a family crest. I don't have a trust fund. What I have is the ability to survive in a world that wants me dead. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to be cold. And I know exactly what the wolves outside these palace walls need because I was one of them until yesterday. This is irrelevant, the elder scoffed, though he took a nervous step back. The law, Torin interrupted, his voice booming from the dais behind me, was written by men who are dead. I am the king. I am alive. And I say the law is finished. You cannot simply— Look at her, Torin commanded, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. Look at her neck, you fool. The elder squinted. He looked at the mark. At that moment, my emotions, pride, anger, love, spiked through the bond. The reaction was instant. The silver light that had flared in the bedroom returned, but this time it was blinding. My skin began to glow, radiating a soft, ethereal luminescence that cast shadows against the far walls. The elder gasped, dropping the book. It hit the floor with a heavy slap. True Luna, someone whispered in the back. The moon's favor, another voice murmured. The skepticism in the room didn't just vanish, it evaporated. You could argue with a king. You could argue with a law. You could not argue with the literal magic of the moon goddess shining out of a nomad's pores. The elder's knees shook. Slowly, painfully, he lowered himself to the ground. He bowed his head, his forehead touching the marble floor. Forgive me, he wheezed. My queen. One by one, the rest of the room followed. The high-born ladies in their gowns, the generals with their medals, the snooty steward by the door. They all dropped. It was a wave of submission that started at my feet and rolled to the back of the hall. I stood there, glowing like a human lighthouse, wearing combat boots and a slip dress, and realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't running. I had arrived. I turned back to the dais. Torin hadn't moved. He was standing by the throne, watching me with a look of such intense, consuming adoration that it felt heavier than the crown. He didn't look at the kneeling crowd. He only looked at me. I walked back up the stairs. When I reached him, he didn't gesture for me to sit in the consort's chair, a smaller, lower seat off to the side. Instead, he sat down on his massive obsidian throne. Then, he patted his thigh. The crowd was still bowing, so they missed the smirk I shot him. You want me to sit on your lap? I whispered. In front of the government? I want you to sit on your throne, he corrected softly. And since you are my heart, this is where you belong. I sat. Torin wrapped his arms around me, pulling me back until I was resting against his chest, his chin on my shoulder. It was a position of absolute possession, but also absolute partnership. He wasn't hiding me. He was presenting me. Raise your heads, Torin commanded. The court looked up. They saw their alpha king, the most terrifying predator in the north, holding a nomad girl as if she were the only precious thing in the universe. The Iron Law is dead, Torin announced, his voice ringing with finality. From this day forward, the packs are one. Nomad, city wolf, highborn. It ends today. Any wolf who swears fealty to this family is protected by this family. He pressed a kiss to the glowing mark on my neck, sealing the decree. Long live the king! A general shouted. Long live the queen! The crowd roared back, the sound deafening. I leaned back against Torin, feeling the steady, powerful thrum of his heart against my back. The bond between us was wide open, a river of gold and silver light connecting our souls. We have a lot of work to do, I thought to him. Fixing the zoning laws, the housing crisis, the parking tickets. Torin chuckled, the sound vibrating through me. We have a lifetime, Cleo. But first, he thought, his mental voice dripping with promise. I believe I promised to show you the view from the balcony. I smiled, interlacing my fingers with his. The road had been long, and the nights had been cold, but as I looked out at the sea of faces cheering for a girl who used to steal apples to survive, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally home.